Good morning. There's a story coming out of Watchtower that illustrates that what's in your heart will come out of your mouth. A sister, one of Jehovah's Witnesses, had died, and she'd left the local congregation a considerable amount of money, not realizing, of course, that it would go to head office. However, one of the local elders thought, oh, this is wonderful, we can have a good sound system. So he went out and bought at a very good price, maybe even half price, a good sound system, and with his expertise and without charging, he installed it. The next thing you know, two officials from the head office come down, and do they say thank you to him for giving of his time and expertise and careful management of the money to give the local congregation a good sound system? No, of course not. They said, no, you haven't stuck to our rules. We take charge of the money. We appoint someone from another congregation to come and do your sound system. So the elders said, if you'd done that, you would have had an inferior system and it would have cost you a lot more. Now that elder lost his faith and left the congregation. And Watchtower, you are responsible for that. And many of us could lose our faith as well. But the same sort of things happened to Jesus Christ. In Matthew chapter 12, we have Jesus and his disciples wandering through a grain field on the Sabbath. Now the disciples are hungry, so they pluck some grain and they rub it to get rid of the chaff, and they eat the kernels. The Pharisees say, you can't do that on the Sabbath. It's harvesting and winnowing. They really were wicked. Jesus tries to explain to them. Now you can read it for yourself in verses 1 to 8 and try to understand what he was getting at. Anyway, on the Sabbath, he goes into the synagogue and there's a man there with a withered hand. And Jesus says to them, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? Which one of you has a sheep and the sheep gets into a pit and it's there at the bottom of the pit, very anxious, no water, no food? Which one of you on the Sabbath would not go and pick the sheep out of the pit? Of course you would. So Jesus said in that case it's lawful to heal because a man is far more worth than a sheep. So he healed the man. Were the Pharisees delighted at this goodness? No. What they said was this, in verse 14. The Pharisees went out and conspired against him, how to destroy him. They really were wicked. There's another instance where Jesus cured a man who was blind and mute because he was demon possessed. And Jesus expelled the wicked spirits. And the man was healed. Now the Pharisees said, oh, you're doing that by means of Beelzebub. So Jesus explains to them that if Satan's kingdom is divided against itself, it won't stand. And he illustrates it by a thief who wants to plunder a strong man's home. First of all, he has to bind up the strong man. Then he can plunder the goods. Now, Jesus wasn't saying that stealing is good, but what he was illustrating was that in order for Jesus to expel the demons, he had to have control over Satan the devil, and the devil was as good as gone. Now, this incident where the Pharisees said he got his power from Beelzebub was really serious, because Jesus said this to them in verses 31 onwards. Therefore I tell you, every sin and blasphemy will be forgiven people, but the blasphemy against the Spirit will not be forgiven. These Pharisees had seen Jesus' goodness. They'd seen the goodness of the Holy Spirit in healing, in the wisdom of his teachings. And yet they said, oh, no, it comes from the devil. So Jesus said to them in verses 32 onwards, either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad. The tree is known by its fruits. You brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Watchtower, your hearts are full of rules, regulation, power, love of money, and you have made your elders into Pharisees. And this is really serious, considering the judgment on the scribes and Pharisees. However, we can fill our hearts with love, kindness, goodness, reasonableness, faithfulness and mercy. And if we do fill our hearts with that, our goodness will come out of our hearts, with God's help, of course. So thank you so much for watching. And you might like to read the whole of that chapter, Matthew chapter 12. God bless.